Today, we have Victor Purolnik from Trustshoring. He's the founder of Trustshoring, where he helps founders build the right team of developers that helps get them from MVP to a full-scale product, even if they don't have any technical skills. And in this talk, Victor's going to share with us the secrets behind finding and motivating and managing developers to scale a SaaS business. So without further ado, Victor, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. It's an honor. StartupSauce has been, I've seen it around for quite a bit. And I was like, want to be part of it. And there you go. That's awesome. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been. My background is software development, computer science, engineering management. I've worked in startups in Berlin, Germany. That is where I'm from. So I've worked in a lot of startups there later, and that's definitely not for this talk, as we don't have enough time. But how I got into working with Eastern European developers, founding my own agency in Ukraine and scaling that to 70 people, which I then exited, and then founded Trustshoring, where we give strategic advice to bootstrap SaaS founders on how to scale their products, and then we also help them set up the right teams or match them to. But all of that later. Should we get into it?
Absolutely. Fire away, Victor. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. I will probably share my screen here. Can you see it?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Awesome. So I'm just going to get right into it. First thing first, because I saw that most people aren't really looking for developers right now. Most of you have developers. The most important information for you is how do I even plan or manage things? And that also is, I think, relevant to technical founders who are kind of moving up from I'm developing things myself to how do I now work with others. For once, be the project manager you always hated. So that's essentially what this is about. The big problem for anybody who's non-technical, really, is that building software, it's not software development. It's actually research and development, R&D. That's why it's called this way. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. You have a few risks to it, and this ties into estimations. Really, why do estimations never work? I think all of us have had that before, is because you have two layers of risks, not just one. It's more fun when it's two, and you really can't know how to estimate. So one is the concept risk, which means what I imagine that I want to be building, is this actually what customers need, right? What I have in my head, what I have sketched out, is this what I really should be building? And most of us are aware of that. Some of us aren't, but I think at that stage, we all know that. And the second risk then, once I figured out what I want to build, but I still don't know if that's actually what will be used, is the development risk. And that is kind of twofold. One, you have misunderstandings in communication, not just in it's about context. It's about developers really understanding what they should be building. How can I really convey that information so that the concept that I have, that this is also the concept that they have. And the second one is the implementation risk, which ties into the technology we're using. And I'm going to go into that. What is the implementation risk that you can have? So for one, and this can be very dependent on who you're working with. Not every developer will have the same risk, because this really depends on, is it a technology that's new for the developer? Has he or she used that framework or library before? Are we using third-party components and APIs, which, well, should work, but maybe don't, and then really we can't really do much about that? Or are we building very unique functionality, complex algorithms we haven't built before, and is this something that, I don't know. I can probably estimate it, but we're going to find edge cases once we dive into it. And of course, what every developer loves is when they take over an existing code base and tell you we have to rewrite everything, which is also very common. Because, and why is that? I'm just going to what I always like to use is the city planner analogy. So asking a developer to estimate bug fixes on an undocumented code base he's never worked with, he or she, is like asking a city planner how long it will take them to eliminate traffic jams in a city where there's no map. There's just no map for that city, and that city planner has never seen it. So that's what you essentially do to a developer asking them to estimate. Because first, this is exactly what they have to do. If there's no map, no sophisticated documentation, they're going to be driving around this entire city for weeks probably until they figure out what does what. It's the same thing. You have plumbing, you have electricity, you plug, a wire out somewhere. What does it do across the city? It's exactly this problem. And if you understand that, you can at least kind of go into that risk. And I'm not sure there you go. So if you estimate like this, you might end up having a problem. Here is a basic list of 3 features. This is of course not documentation. This assumes you have documentation about these 3 features or tasks somewhere else. But let's say your developer estimates like this. So this is some payment issue. We need to, VAT, everybody loves us Europeans with VAT. So you got to implement that to be compliant with our laws. A user has to add a VAT ID. I need to calculate the VAT, which is like the sales tax here in Europe, and convert that to the user's currency, let's say euros. Sample task. So if you estimate like this, developer says 4.5 hours, 12 hours, 5 hours, you're like, okay, that's cool, awesome, I can work with that. I sign this off with my golden pen, and you're allowed to exactly use those 21.5 hours. And that's usually not what happens. So what's a better way? A better way, and this is our estimation power sheet, is to give it a bit more information. Now, I'm not sure if you can, I hope you can see this. These tasks, so what we should ideally do is give two hourly estimation values, a best case and a worst case. That's the first step. Because now what I previously showed you was kind of the average, the average of both. And here you see, okay, 4 to 5 hours. This is pretty accurate. We can work with it. That means the developer actually is fairly certain about this time. But with the next one, calculate VAT, it's 8 to 16 hours. Well, this is a certainty of 50% is just a random metric I made up, divide one by the other, but it shows you pretty clearly how certain the developer is about this task. And converting the currency is a bit better, a bit worse, 4 to 6, that's fair enough. But what's the most important information here now? Remember when I spoke about the 2 types of risks you have? 1, the misunderstandings, and 2, the implementation. So now you ask the developer to put 2 flags or two ratings here. 1 essentially being the clarity of the documentation. How sure is the developer they understand, they really know how clear this is. And developers usually have a pretty clear understanding if they know or don't know something, but they're just asked to estimate something, so they do. And now you see the second one is the risk of the technology. Developers usually can also pretty fairly assess how risky the technology is if you ask them to. So now you see that calculating the VAT, here the docs are really unclear. The developer essentially has no idea how to calculate VAT. What can you do to fix this? Well, now you understand that you need to clarify it more. Talk through it with the developer. Understand what he does or he or she does or does not understand. Give more documentation, share a few links, maybe put down the math formulas, whatever. Tech, pretty simple. We're calculating stuff. That's what developers do. That's what computers do. Nothing fancy about it. The next one, though, converting to user currency. There, we know what's happening. I mean, converting from one currency to the other, not so much of a big deal. We understand that, but we are using a new API for the Forex rates, which we've never used. So this is my risk. And what can I do about this risk? Because now that I have this information, this is the important thing. Now that gives me power over these tasks. I can eliminate or mitigate these risks. I can say, I will document better when something's unclear. I can reprioritize things that have a technical risk or eliminate them completely. Because once you know what part causes the problems and not just the entire project, you can deal with this. So right now we've just said, okay, what we're going to do the Forex exchange later. We have documented the VAT calculation better. We are fairly certain how long we're going to take for all of this. This is cool. This we can give to a developer. And I'm going to share this sheet. There's a template we have for Google Docs. I'm just going to share that with everyone afterwards. There's also a question, frequent question, what issue tracker to use, where to document. This is actually, it doesn't matter that much, honestly. Unless you have a 5, 10, 15, 20 people development team. Yes, Jira is kind of the big one here, and most people are using Jira. Most developers know Jira. There's a lot of other ones that are popular. I'm not sure what's happening here with the. There you go. The most important thing is to have a place where you document, to have something where you can track the state of things, to assign people to be reminded. There's also a lot of people like Trello because it's much simpler than Jira. And there's a cool plugin developed by a friend of mine. It's called Corello. It gives you all the burn down and Scrum metrics for Trello. You can also use Jira. You can use GitLab, which is super popular with developers. It is all in one. It's a Git hosting, Git repo hosting. It's issue tracking. It's continuous integration. It's everything. A lot of people use Basecamp if they actually, or especially if they follow Basecamp's methodology for development, which I'm also going to get into. I apologize if I am a bit too fast, but I have actually a lot of slides here, and I think the questions on the second part, we're really going to dive into questions. So if there's anything that was too fast, just take a note what you want me to repeat, and in the second part we'll just go over it again. Time tracking and accountability. This is a very tricky one, unfortunately. There's no golden solution to it. The easiest part is to first be clear what needs to be done, when, until when, set the correct expectations, and then to really compare the results. Do you use time tracking software? Do use software maybe even within Jira or something like that that tracks time per hour? Developers should be used to that and should be doing that. What also works really, really, really well is having daily stand-ups. So a daily stand-up, the format is, what have you done yesterday? What will you do today? And what is blocking you? And by that, especially if you do it, so I like stand-ups actually on Slack, not really in calls, because then you scroll. We have, in my team, we have a channel just for stand-ups. And you scroll up. The person said, I'm going to do these 10 things today. We're going to scroll down. We copy all of that, paste it in, and make like these check marks. And then you really see, has that worked? Were you able to estimate your workload correctly? Do you have any problems anywhere? It's a very unintrusive, humane way of accountability, together with the time tracking software. That's fairly cool. Do not attempt to use automated tracking solutions, anything that records your screen or checks on the developer or does real-time things like that. Why? I'm not going to go into the ethical part of this at all. The simple argument is a good developer will not agree to it, and that's where they have the power, unfortunately. You will not find, usually, maybe you will, but generally you will not find a senior developer who will even attempt to use such a tool. On being able to move fast, there's a lot of problems that I see founders have, that things just take forever and ever and ever, especially early stage, but also later stage. A software startup, any startup really lives or dies from the ability to create alignment and iterate very, very, very fast. And that's where the solo tech founder has a huge advantage, because they know two things. One, what they want to do, like what the end result should be. And at the same time, they can iterate in their head, how can I build this the fastest way? And if I modify something that makes building faster, will this still be the right thing for the client? So that allows a technical founder to very fast create prototypes and the like. Whereas if you have a developer, you as the founder, you know the problem and you have the concept on how to solve the problem. And then you have the developer who knows the technology, might know a faster way of solving your problem, but only if they actually deeply understand the problem as well. And that's where you have, a bit of a back and forth. So shortening this loop is really important. And for that, really not just throwing tasks a developer's way, but really sharing the business insights, really sharing the user goals. The more documentation you create in terms of customer persona, user journeys, things like that help a developer understand why we're building things. There you give them really powerful knowledge to help you build faster. The good news is you do not have to learn to code to be an effective founder at all. Absolutely not. Actually, technical founders may have an advantage because they can build faster, but their disadvantage is they just build 10 times more of it. So it really, it just zeroes everything out, because we tend to get into product development and then we don't stop. And then we suddenly realize we have a huge product we've never sold to a single customer. So don't think that coding is the solution to your problem. It's not. But here's the big but. Learning about general software development, not about developing software, but about how software development works, how product management works, how the life cycle works, is crucial, because then you can make good decisions very fast. Understanding data models, tables, it's not that hard, but it helps a lot. Understanding about various maybe languages or technologies. I see that the people who are best at building software these days are people with a product management background. So that's really someone who doesn't have to be technical, but really understands the business part, really understands I don't want to say technical part, but definitely how to work with developers, and also basics of UI, UX. This is the iteration cycle that I was speaking about, that person can do very quickly on their own. So learning about that, and there's a lot of resources on the web how to be a product manager. If you want to read up on one thing, this is really, really helpful. And that brings me into how should I develop? And you've probably all heard this thing about waterfall versus Scrum. So waterfall is where you plan everything out, like everything of a gigantic software project. You'll have you will need a consultant who understands everything and plans it out, every single task. And then you do these old school project management things where you have graphs and diagrams, and then you have a total number of hours and money, and then you hit go, and then you work for 2 years, and magically a software product should appear at the other end. What's lacking here are these feedback loops. You have one concept, give it to estimation, give it to implementation, and that's it. There's no feedback back ever. And that is bad for a startup environment for one reason, because of this conceptual risk. You change things. Here you can't change it. You have one concept, you go, it's done. Whatever you learn during implementation, it never finds its way back to the concept. That's why we came up with Agile. What happens is we just create a general roadmap of our business priorities. Then designer or a product manager or whoever, a product person, creates a rough concept, at least for the next roadmap item. We go into implementation, we build a quick small thing, and then we feed back everything back to the concept, back to the roadmap. We understand how is the impact, and then we only decide what to build next. Usually these feedback loops, they tend to also take a while. because usually the design sprint is like 2 weeks before the development sprint. So you still have designers working on their thing, developers and taking that over. It's essentially like a tiny waterfall. It's a 2-week waterfall that you do. So it's better. It's much better. But there's a thing that I really learned to like, especially in smaller startups where there's a bigger uncertainty still. You still can't have a 6-month roadmap. You can't plan everything. There's something that I like even more than Agile Scrum, and it's called Shape Up. It's by the Basecamp folks. There's a free book about it. It's linked here. You can just Google Shape Up by Ryan Singer, the one who just left Basecamp. And what you do here is you create a problem description, and then you hand it over to your team, which is where you are actually part of it, and you do a thing that's called shaping up. So you don't provide a documentation of what's supposed to be built. You create a problem description, a pitch, and then the shaping up phase is creating a proposal on how to solve this problem. Everybody's involved here. You research, you try to understand what could be done. You create various variants of what the solution could look like, but it's done together. The designer, the developer, it's like, is this feasible? Maybe let's do something else, but it's not implementation. You don't rush into doing things. After the shaping phase, you have a proposal ready, or various of them. And then you decide, okay, we're going to build this. And then you go into implementation. Everybody already knows what they have to do. What Basecamp suggests is that all of this should take about 6 weeks. But you see that these feedback cycles are within these teams, within these phases. You are very quick at iterating and at scoping and building knowledge within a certain iteration. So if you have high uncertainty, you can't have everything documented out fully. This is a really nice thing to do. How to save on developing a feature. Sorry for saying it, don't build it. That is pretty much the best way to save money. Number one, to save the most money. It really is the number one way of saving a lot of headache, whether it's cost money or a bad UX. Having customers complain about not being able to find stuff, whatever comes out of it, don't build too much. This is really the number one thing. Probably people who know me, they would expect that I say outsource. No, don't build it. That's the number way to save. The second thing, which ties into not building it, is to iterate on the concept outside of code as much as possible. Changing something in code is, because if you think about it, what do we do when we build code? What do computers do? Computers are great at scaling, automating processes, right? So it's like I put extra effort into building code using expensive engineers to automate something that I know is working. Now, what happens if you don't know that this is what you want? Then you're using the most expensive way to iterate on a concept. If you can use, wireframes, prototypes like that, anything to iterate on something before putting it in code, this will save you a huge amount of money. I always say when people ask me, I want to apply for funding, so can you find me someone who can estimate this concept that I have, and then I'll take that budget and I'll go find an investor for it. And I say, that's not what you should be doing. Well, there's a few problems with that, but the biggest problem is that if the investor sees that you want to spend 100% of the funding on the first iteration, they know that the following is going to happen. You're going to launch and you're going to learn that it's all wrong, that you need to completely rebuild it. And ta-da, you don't have money for it, but you also didn't gain any more traction with it. So you cannot spend your entire budget on the first iteration because it's a given that you need to iterate on it. The next way to save money is to take on technical debt. And now, whoever has not heard of this term, technical debt is a very cool concept because it's a very nice word for writing shit code and using cheap developers. So essentially, what you do is you save on the proper architecture, on the proper infrastructure. and that enables you to launch and launch, not scale, to launch much faster. Now, the important thing is it's called debt for a reason. It doesn't actually save money. So whoever told you I financed my TV using a loan, I saved a lot of money, you know they haven't really understood economics. So the thing is, the technical debt, you need to pay it back at some point because it really hinders your growth later on. But there is, and developers don't like it much, there is a time to do that, because in the beginning, if you're just trying to validate something and you don't know if it's going to work, why not borrow against technical debt if you're going to close this down afterwards anyway? It doesn't hurt anyone. But then usually if it does work out for you, usually at some point there comes this moment when nothing is working, things are breaking, slowing down, adding any feature, any new feature, just it takes forever, creates bugs, and you have a huge problem. That's when you have too much technical debt. And unfortunately, this is the moment when you need to move the fastest, but you have to kind of rewrite your software. It's horrible. It's a terrible spot to be in. This is why many people decide not to take on technical debt. But you do what you do. You do what you can to deliver within a certain budget. This is your decision in the end as a founder, like any other financial decision. And I already mentioned it. Learn more about software development, UX, PM. Why is that? I will say why that is in a second. There are two very relevant episodes of our own podcast, which is called Product Stories. So Craig Hewitt from Castos is speaking about ShapeUp a little. He's a non-technical founder. He's speaking about how he's learned to work with developers because he's had a productized service first, and then he only bought a SaaS and had to learn all of that. And Kyle Racky, he has a 100-person company called Proposify, 50-people product team. Super interesting thing here is he's completely eliminated roadmaps, and why that is and what he's doing instead. This is on that episode. You can find that on trustshoring.com. The links will be there, but I think this is super relevant if you want to dive more into it. Now, who to hire, what type of developer, what kind of seniority, the sources, where can I find people, how do I vet them? Well, this is now I have a problem with my keyboard, I think. Anyway, this is actually an internal guideline that we have within our company. I don't usually share this, but this is how we internally make decisions on who to match someone with. The thing is, what kind of developer is right for you? So if you are technical, and you will be involved, and this is important. Most technical developers, technical founders, think they will be involved in development, but later they actually decide, I really need to focus on other things, even though I'm technical. So that's why this question is actually important. So if you are going to be involved and you already have a team, then you go on job boards, find a recruiter if you can't find someone through job boards, and just add people, augment staff to your team. If you don't already have a team, really the easiest way to go through someone that's called an outstaffer. They're a company that recruit and hire developers, do all the payroll in one place, have certain roles that people could potentially even be co-located, but you don't need to run payroll and all of it. If you don't want to be involved in development, if you really just want to slide back into the product manager role and maybe make some larger technical decisions, then what I call a dev shop is really good for you, because a dev shop usually has a process. A very good software house has a process, has a project manager, which, not to be confused, doesn't mean you cannot speak to your team. That's not the case. You have your team, but there is a set of certain process. You can let go a little. You don't have to attend every day the stand-ups and answer questions, but you can just work with a team that has its existing process and build up knowledge there over time. Depending on how long you work with them, they will essentially become like your in-house team members. If you aren't technical and you don't see yourself as a product manager at all, as someone who understands how to create concepts and share what you want, then your best way, and there is a difference, many people don't know that, finding a good product agency that can actually consult you really on what you should be building is very rare. Many people see that just going to developers, telling them their concept and expecting magically a product to appear on the other side is really not what you can expect from a dev shop. So most of the time you will find a normal dev shop, but they are really not that good at product consulting. So that's a very other kind of different kind of agency. And of course, with that, the cost goes up. The more, and that's why I'm saying the more you learn about this kind of stuff, how to manage, how to document, the more cost effective you will work, because the highest paid jobs are, of course, the decision makers. So obviously this is where you pay more or less. Another important lesson to learn is that there is no such thing as cheap software development. You can go, we work a lot with Eastern Europe. You can try to hire somewhere else. It's cheaper, but there's no such thing as cheap software development anymore. So really, the past 5 years, that just doesn't exist. How much will development cost me? This is what people expect. The seniority. A junior person will be cheap when I want to build something. A very senior person will be super expensive. So I might just go down this path, and maybe I'm just going to go for the cheaper quote, right? Why not? Why shouldn't I do that? So here's actually the reality of this. For every single piece of software that you can build, there's going to be a developer who's too good to build it. Not that he's not going to do it, but he's going to be very expensive, he or she. Simply, if you ask a NASA engineer to build a WordPress site, given you convince them to do it, they're going to be, it's going to cost you a lot of money. At the same time, if you hire a developer that's not good enough, that is also going to cost you a lot of frustration, a lot of additional hours. Probably they weren't able to estimate the project correctly. So this is just as well going to end up very, very expensive. And I'm seeing this all the time. So there is a sweet spot. What is the sweet spot? Hard to tell, but there is a sweet spot where for the given product, you're getting the best price, but that can be fairly different, because why? A tech founder who understands how to manage a junior developer might be able to build a product, with $10,000. I'm just taking numbers from the air, from the sky. Whereas, the non-technical founder who needs help with decision making hires a product agency. The same product might cost him or her $20K, just because they need more aid, more help, more conceptual work. And that's why this really depends on you and on the product you're building, what the ideal developer and seniority is. And if you're now super confused and you have no idea what to think of this and who to work with, just shoot me an email. I'm super happy to help, super happy to just go over that. I do this all the time. People ask me, who should I work with? What is this? And who's the best kind of developer for me? Where should I hire? Location. You should have 2 hours of overlap in working hours. In my experience, you don't need more. It's good to have more, but it's not necessary. Why? It's good to leave developers alone. It's good to, because when you're in, and developers really have this, when you're in the zone, when you're building this castle in your imagination, you know how things work, you're building something, you're really concentrated and focused on something. Any distraction, any Slack message, it's just studies show that when you disturb your developer, they need 2 hours to get into the same state they were before, into the same state of productivity. There's nothing less productive you can do than interrupting them. So 2 hours is actually totally fine, because you can sort out whatever you need to sort out, have your stand-ups, answer questions, and then just leave them alone and have them develop stuff. Important is so-called cultural overlap. I call it, the ability to read between the lines when somebody's saying something, knowing what they mean. There's a lot of shared culture in or also a lot of different cultures where you have a lot of communication issues, and that's why it's good or easiest to work with people from a very close culture, just because you will not have that many misunderstandings. But if you know what you're doing, and you know something about a different culture, it's very easy to work with them as well. You just need to understand that you need to understand them, and they're not so likely to understand you. You need to be able to work with that. Very important legal stuff. The easiest thing you can do is hire self-employed people. I know that, especially, although I've never worked in the US, so I don't know the details, but it's fairly easy to hire freelancers or the gig economy, although I know that California is pretty much closing down on that recently. But generally, it's not that hard to hire people, and that's how most people approach hiring people overseas as well. Beware that Europe has a different working culture entirely. There's a lot of regulation, and most countries, mostly those you would never consider for outsourcing, like Germany, like Denmark, like Sweden, nobody outsources there because it's not cheaper, it's more expensive. But you would not be able to work with a full-time freelancer there. You just can't, it's not allowed. And a lot of other countries are actually adding regulations like that as well. Most recently, Serbia. It's very hard to hire people there full-time right now unless you open a subsidiary entity or you use an employer of record, which adds more costs. So this is changing. We're monitoring this very constantly. Currently, Ukraine and Poland are very good, but that really depends on the country. Here's about the cultural aspect. So this is a really cool tool. This is called the country mapping tool, the culture mapping tool. Sorry, a country. It's by a woman called Erin Meyer, and what it shows you is different aspects of communication and cultural understanding between different countries. And here you have the US and Ukraine. The yellow one is Ukraine, the red one is the US, for example. And here you see Americans communicate with fairly low context versus Ukrainians with fairly high context. And that may cause misunderstandings. Also, super different is when you try to persuade someone. Americans tend to name applications and show on a certain use case why I want to use something or do something, versus Ukrainians, such as the cultural thing, more rely on principles, that something should or could be working by principle. Now, of course, this isn't for everyone. This is a study. This is an oversimplification. This is a model. But generally, there are very interesting things. And the further or the different cultures you try to work with, this is super interesting to know. And it's actually very fun to then see these things play out in reality and just understanding, okay, that's how it is. That's how I need to deal with that person. That makes it very much easier. How to vet developers. Now, there are 3 things that you can do as a non-technical founder as well. Check the portfolio. Do I like their previous work? I have to get on a call. Do we click? It's very important. Don't work with someone you really don't get along with. You have a feeling what you are saying, they don't really understand. You can ask people to repeat things in their own words. That really helps. That really gives this understanding. You can, of course, do a technical test task, and see whether someone is experienced. But what you do when you're a non-technical founder, well, a great thing you can do, especially with software houses, because a lot of developers, like solo developers, have not written big software alone. right? But with software houses, with bigger teams, you can easily do this. You can ask them for a project they have been actively developing for more than 1 year. So for a long time, ideally 2 years or 3 years. What have you been developing for the past 2, 3 years that has a large amount of users? And please give me the contact details to that founder. And now you're going to ask them, how is working on this piece of software for you with this team? Is adding new features, is that smooth? Are there a lot of bugs? Are there any performance issues? Because what you need to understand about code quality, or whatever people call it, is that you don't build good, you don't write good code just for the sake of it, although it may seem like that. You build it for a very specific reason. Good code gives you, one, scalability. The app works fast. Two, extendability. It's easy to add new features. And three, I forgot. But anyway, these are the two most important ones. Because so now if you look at a product like that, and it's been built, because it's very easy to build something that's working from scratch for 1 month. Whether it's good code or not, it's going to work. It's going to be fine. If it even doesn't work, then you really have bad developers. But generally, it's not a problem to build an MVP with bad code. But once you have something big that's used by a lot of users, that is actually working super well and working on it is easy, then almost by definition, the architecture they've written is very good. Where to find developers? A lot of people look on Upwork and Fiverr, freelancer platforms. For agencies, you can use Clutch. You can have a lot of filtering done, and there's like reviews that are, let's say, vetted by the platform itself. There's job boards for finding full-time developers. And there's, of course, us who wouldn't pitch themselves. What we do is that we actually give one-on-one individual advice and guidance. We focus on bootstrapped SaaS founders. We tell people what to do, how to hire, and then bring the solution with us. Two more relevant episodes. Here we have a friend of mine, very cool guy from London. He is running a funded startup that's very exciting in the prop tech space right now. It's called Work Club, and he's a seasoned CTO, and he's exposing his strategy on how he built this product very fast. So over 3 iterations, 3 totally different approaches. How he built the MVP and validated everything very fast. Then how he built more, actually 4 phases, how he built more around that. Then once he scaled, how he decided to make this a very stable and scalable product. And once he did, how he's now continuing to slowly build up new features. It's not like the product is feature complete, but you don't need that speed anymore. They just raised another round. They're more focusing on marketing right now. Very interesting episode. And we have Andrew Corona coming up, who has used a mix of US-based and Ukrainian developers to bootstrap his SaaS company without external funding. On the other hand, so this is also very interesting. He will share so we've recorded already, but it's not out yet. So if you want to subscribe to, then you will see when it comes out. About myself, I am a German founder. I already said my background and all of this. So since 2016, I am working with I started Trustshoring. I'm running it, and we have helped over 200 startups launch and scale their products with remote developers. We give strategic advice on how to set up your team, what to do even in your given situation. We assess where you are, what's your goal, what's your entire context, what's your budget, what are your timelines, and then we either match you up with the right software house. We have a network of over 50 software houses, product agencies, consultants, designers, and a lot of freelancers and recruiters who we've been working with for years now. And we just bring that entire infrastructure. And so that scaling your business can be your priority again. now we were asked to give a discount on our service, and I first said, well, we can't give a discount. And Bell said, well, why is that? And I said, well, because the problem is we don't charge for that. So we decided to give 100% discount instead on exactly $0. Essentially, because what we do is we have the podcast, we have our complete outsourcing playbook, which is free as well, and we have our strategic advice and vendor matchmaking. And obviously, everybody asks, "Well, you've got to make money somehow, don't you? Or is it a money laundering scheme?" And I'm like, no, it actually is a business. We are a broker, so whenever we send you to one of our partners and you actually start working with them and you love them and you continue working with them, then we get a finder's fee from that, but you don't pay for it. Now, if you want these slides, if you want my estimation power sheet, just drop me an email, vp@trustshoring.com, subject StartupSauce or anything else, and I'll just send them over to you. No strings attached, no nothing, no email list, or anything like that. Yeah, it's 52, so I think we're good with that, and I'll hand over back to Ryan.
Fantastic, Victor. That was awesome. Thank you so much. Great, really good.
You're welcome.